It has been said that average people want you to stay average. Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now, for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Rick Morris.
Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast. I am here with my friend Rick, and we are in season 3, episode number 9. Hey, Rick, how you doing, man?
What's going on, Paul? How are you, brother?
Good. I can't wait to get into this book to lead. So we're going to have some fun today. We're diving into another phenomenal. I mean, this book blew me away. So we'll talk about that in a second. But we're focused on this idea of leadership, confidence, charisma. You know, that's really the focus word is charisma, but share a little bit more, talk about more of what we're getting into here today, Rick.
Yeah, charisma, or really, influence, right? We start looking at charisma, and this was a gateway book for me, and we'll talk about it in a second here. But this was the first one that it came out in 2012. I was about 3 or 4 years into really speaking professionally. So, I started speaking 2005, 2008 was my first, or 2006 was my first paid gig. My book came out in 2008. So I was starting to get there and trying to up level my speaking ability and my presence on stage. And there's this book talking about charisma, but saying that it's a myth in a way. And so as I picked it up, it really started to get me thinking in different areas. And that's what we're going to share today.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about, guys, our name of the podcast is Breaking Average. And after I went through this book and, I'd seen it before, Rick, I'll be honest with you, I kind of shelved it and I'm like, one day. And then you picking this book, because Rick picked this book, it kind of elevated the need for me to be able to pull this off and explore it. And I was blown away with it. I already told you before we turn on the record, I spent more time than I normally do in prep, just because this book was really grabbed my attention in a way that I had never expected. I expected just to kind of get a quick glance at it and look at it, and we'll unpack it here. But, if you're watching or you're listening to this, kind of lean in, grab a pen, grab some paper, write some notes, because you're going to get some good nuggets from Rick and I. And it's really a reflection of what's in this book. It's so good. So I think it's critical to Breaking Average. So let's dive in. So again, you talked about that gateway moment. You want to unpack that a little bit more?
Yeah. And so the book itself is The Charisma Myth, and that's Olivia Fox. I believe it's Cabane is how you say her last name.
Cabane, yes.
I want to break into this story for just a second, just because I talk to a lot of people that say, I don't know if I have what it takes to be on stage, or, what I want to say. The thing I hear more than anything about people who want to become professional speakers is it's all been said before, or, I don't have anything necessarily new. And I always say back to them, I was like, there's tons of audiences out there. And just because it's been said before, it hasn't been said by you. And those people may not have heard it yet. And I say that because the other thing that we talked about specifically to this series, Paul, is rereading books. So like you read a book and it speaks to you at a time in your life. And this is one of those. I happened to flip through, I saw one thing in it. It really spoke to me. I ended up then consuming the book, right? But I don't think if I didn't see that one page at that one time, I probably wouldn't have bought the book myself. Now that I had to reread it for this series, I know, and after studying, Cialdini and all these other areas around influence, I could see that was just the first time I was hearing some of this material that is somewhat widely available in other areas. It was just the first time I was hearing it. So it was perfect, right? It's one of these books, like somebody may pick it up and go, yeah, I've heard that stuff before. I've read it before. It was just the first time it was hitting me that way. It was the first time I was hearing some of this information. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah. And I can't wait to pull some of these nuggets here, guys. But first off, we want to invite you to visit our website, breakingaverage.com. Go check us out. We're trying to put more notes and info regarding our podcast and other resources out there to support you and encourage you and help you lead better and break average. So visit us at breakingaveragepodcast.com or just breakingaverage.com and check us out. And if you know a leader, we're in our interview season. So we're doing our podcast here on, we record Sunday mornings just for you guys to know, but we are in constant prep in terms of future stuff. And we're lining up some great interviews. But if you know a leader, let us know. Go to that website. So yeah, Olivia Fox Cabane, author of the book, Charisma Myth. Check it out on Amazon. We want to encourage you to grab a hold of that resource. And you want to share a little bit more how they can go get it, maybe learn more about Olivia?
Yeah. So Olivia has lectured at Stanford, Yale, Harvard, MIT, Marine Corps, War College, United Nations, has been a keynote speaker and executive coach to the leadership of Fortune 500 companies. And she helps people become more persuasive, influential, and inspiring. And what I really enjoy about her is she brings to me the human side of the influence study. So if you're studying influence, like Cialdini gives you gives you really the research behind it. And she gives more of those stories and things that she's experienced and how to bucket it in different ways. So you can visit Amazon.com, like you said, and check out this book, The Charisma Myth.
Yeah. And I know she's got other books out there. I haven't had a chance to look through those, but this book, definitely, it's worthy of our top 16 books that we're going through this season. So awesome. All right, so let's get into it. You share a little bit more of why you like the book, and I certainly want to unpack that some more. But we've talked about just that high level, the confidence, the leading. But tell me more. What are the things, like if you were talking to John Maxwell, and you said, John, this is why I love this book, what would you tell him?
Yeah, it was the first one that broke down 3 elements of charisma for me. And so when we talk about charisma, at first there's almost a negative context to me when you hear that, because it's almost like when I do my my talk around the art of ethical influence, I say that all of these powers can be used for good or for bad. And for some reason, when you start talking about charisma or how to be more charismatic, most people's brains go to like, how do I pick up people at a bar? You know what I mean? Like, how do I use this to almost snow somebody, right? When you start talking about influence, how do I use this to fool somebody or to manipulate them to my way of thinking or what I want them to do? And and that's why there's got to be that ethics side of it, the ethical influence. But when you start to break down like charisma, what makes somebody charismatic? It's not always, good looks, right? Or some people think it's fancy things or whatever. But there was 3 words that she used, and that was presence, power, and warmth. And all 3 elements really need to exist for charisma to be effective. So and we'll break those down further a little bit. But the first one I went to, though, was power, because, again, I had that negative kind of context of that, of like, well, of course, if you've got power. But when she starts talking about power, power is not power in terms of title or all the other stuff. But the definition she uses is power is the ability to affect the world around us. Right. Mm-hmm. Again, influence, whether it be on influence or power over others. And that can be based on appearance, but it's also based on other people's reaction to us, body language. But really, when I started to think of the word power, it's that ability to influence the world around us, to get people to start to believe in a mission or a vision, or start to take action. So to me, those were kind of things. So if I were saying things to John, I would say, John, I think you're charismatic, because he's a very charismatic speaker.
Yes.
But he's present with us. But John has that exuberance of warmth on stage.
Yeah.
That really brings you in. So it fits in all those: presence, power, and warmth.
I was thinking the same thing. That's why I brought up John Maxwell, because he reflects, and we know a lot of great leaders who probably have these attributes: presence, power, and warmth. But John, for me, kind of stood out above the crowd, because he comes in, and I think it's a learned trait for him too. That's the great thing about this book. It's the charisma myth is, and I've heard it said, Rick, maybe you have too, like charisma, you're just born with it or you don't. You either have it or you don't. But that's not true. That's a myth. That's a myth. And she's talking about, and I love that story of James, I think it is, at the very end of the book. If you just read the conclusion, if you go into Barnes and Noble and you see this book, just go read the conclusion. There's this powerful story of James, who is a struggling leader. He's positionally, he's there. He is there, but his confidence level is kind of weak. He does not have that connection with those that he's leading. And she takes him through this pathway of what Rick's talking about, improving his presence, his power, and warmth, all three of those things. If you get the right balance in there. And in just a short period of time, now when James walks into the room, people notice he has command. He has connection, a lot like John Maxwell does when he walks into the room, right? And she's making this point. We all have the capacity for presence, power, and warmth. These behaviors, they can be learned. And we can do a few things like adjusting our position of our body language. We can talk about that, because I see that a lot in leaders. Where do they fail? Maybe where I fail, guys, is just my gestures and how I reflect and how I respond. This is true of all of us. We can all get better in those areas. Our voice, our conversation, our presentation skills. And she makes this great point at the end of that book. It's kind of the last line. She says, enjoy the progression. So when we go into it, and we're going to talk about this, kind of get into my tip and challenge early, is this element of process growth and just enjoying the journey. And we'll talk about that. But let's get into some of the takeaways. You've already mentioned those three things, but what other big takeaways did you have from this book? Because I had a bunch. So
I did too. Yeah. I like it's one thing to say that power and presence and warmth, those are kind of the keys, right? But then she does a really good job in the book of starting to say, but here's some obstacles to that. And I think that's what really humanized it for me. And so, for instance, physical discomfort. Right out of the gate, she talks about physical discomfort, and she talks about to combat it, wear clothes that fit well.
Yes.
Eat well, get the right. And these are things that we know, but I didn't tie that into, obviously, if you feel good, you exude confidence. If you feel great, you exude confidence. But really sitting down and just saying, like, breaking it down to, like, are you wearing clothes that fit you well? Are you tense? Do you need to reframe your frame of mind? And Brendan Bouchard talks about transitional moments, and John Maxwell talks about it as well. John talks about sitting down, looking at his agenda, and thinking forward. How can I bring value? Right, and that's just that mental shift, right? And Brendan kind of talks the same thing, but more real time, in the sense of transitional moments. So you just finished this meeting, you've got this next meeting coming up. How do I need to show up? And those types of thoughts help you kind of exude that confidence. But I loved all that side of the mental. I didn't really ever think about the physical side. And that's why that spoke to me, Paul.
Yeah. It's so good. The physical discomfort that we have. I've seen it. I've been in those situations where I just was physically uncomfortable, and I wasn't able to lead as well as I could have and should have. Why? Because I just wasn't comfortable. I wasn't maybe feeling 100%. Maybe I just wasn't good in terms. Funny story. I'm on a cruise ship. I think I've shared this with you before. I know I have. And our bags never made it on the cruise ship. Nice. So it's white night. We don't have white. I'm wearing a black t-shirt on white night, right? Yeah. And so I was physically uncomfortable initially, but then something happened, because I didn't have a lot of clothes to choose from. I only had one set of clothes essentially, and I just kind of kept them as fresh as I could. But my decision-making process was so simple. And even though there was some physical discomfort, because I wish I had, the right clothes to wear for the right event, my mental discomfort wasn't so bad. Why? Because I didn't have any anxiety in terms of what I had to wear. Like, what's the right thing to, like, wear what I got. And it made me realize that I need to try to reduce at least some of the decisions that I have to make, right? Maybe I don't need as much stuff, for example, right? So I love the mental discomfort, anxiety caused by uncertainty, dissatisfaction caused by comparison. That happens, right? Self-criticism, self-doubt. Those are all the obstacles. So those are some of the nuggets there. And I love how she gets into overcoming the obstacles too. So.
Yeah. So you mentioned self-doubt. And so I was mentioning something that just what had stopped me in my tracks of this book, right? So what were the two words that jumped off the page at me to made me stop and take a deeper dive in this book? And that was imposter syndrome. So we talk about, again, this may be the first time, this is the first time I was hearing it. And I was like, imposter syndrome, what is that? Right. And so for those of you that don't know it, really self-doubt talks about, she says in the book, is a lack of confidence in our own ability to achieve something. And basically, in one of the manifestations of self-doubt known as the imposter syndrome, competent people feel they don't really know what they're doing and are just waiting for someone to expose them as a fraud. So as we mentioned, Olivia has done keynotes at Stanford and Yale and MIT and Harvard. She says that when she brings this up at those places, so she's at Harvard and Yale and Stanford and MIT, and so arguably some of the brightest people, right, in the country, right? You have to strive for almost perfection to get into some of these schools. They all are harboring that self-doubt. She said you can actually hear a pin drop when she's talking about imposter syndrome, and you also can feel them physically breathe like, oh, it's not just me. And I struggle with that all the time. And there was something, the way that she said it, that really keyed in for me. It says, she said, interestingly, the imposter syndrome is worst among high performers. And so I don't know if it's this thing that because we have this self-doubt, we have this drive, Paul, that we've got to overcome that, or I don't know why exactly that is, but it seems like with more responsibility that we have, or the higher we can climb a corporate ladder, the worse our self-doubt becomes. It's really interesting. And then that can translate on days that you are in that uber self-doubt mode. It can translate to a lack of confidence, which then can translate into a lack of charisma.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, and I'm glad you pulled on that. Years ago, I used to listen to a radio program called Focus on the Family, and any listeners or viewers out there, you may know who I'm talking about, James Dobson. And I think he still does part of the show, at least not every day, but I think he's out there. But I remember listening to him always on the drive to work. And he made a comment that kind of stuck with me forever. And he says, the thing that I worry about is that one day I'm going to step up on stage or in front of this microphone, and I'm going to be looked upon as somebody who isn't quite what the resume shows. And yes, I mean, I've got all these books written. Yes, I've done all these studies. Yes, I'm passionate about helping families, but I'm human, and I'm doing my very best. But I feel like I'm under a microscope sometimes. And the truth of it is I'm human and I'm not perfect. And again, I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember the exact words. And I realized that I have to really watch my step. And that puts more pressure on me to make sure that I am aligned with who my values are. And I continue to cast my vision, and I continue to step forward. And he's a man of integrity for sure, 100%. But he's dealing, what he's talking about, Rick, is he was really dealing with imposter syndrome, right? Not that he is an imposter. Let's get that right. It's not that you are, if you're dealing with it. It's just that you feel like, somebody might think I'm not quite who I ought to be, that my credentials and my resume and the qualifications that are there aren't being reflected in who I am or what I'm doing or how I feel in that day. So that's what he's talking about. So let's get in a little bit. First of all, one of my big takeaways, I'll start off. I kind of want to rewind a little bit. I want to get back to that self-doubt and what we can do to really build our charisma. But let's get back into those myths for a second, Rick. So this is my first takeaway. Charisma myths. The myths are, and I've fallen trap to these. I don't know if you have, that you have to be naturally boisterous or outgoing to be charismatic. Like, okay, now they're just an extrovert. Only extroverts can be charismatic, right? Or you have to be attractive to be charismatic. All right. Or you have to, for me to be charismatic, I've got to totally change my personality. Like, think of DISC. And by the way, what a phenomenal resource that could be made for this book is a DISC profile. And we'll get into some of these elements to it, because I think independent upon where you are personality wise, you can be charismatic. Doesn't matter. You don't have to be a certain type of DISC profile to be charismatic. So those were some myths. Any thoughts on that?
No, I'm going to pull on what you said though, and I was trying to flip it into my notes here real quick. But she actually has different ways to put into practice charisma. And to me, when I read through it again, it not a mirror to DISC, but if you understand DISC, you understand why she's putting it into this. But I can't find the chart real quick.
Yeah. So the chart was, I got it. So the takeaway 3 was the different charismatic styles.
There you go.
Right. So you want me to run through the list real quick and we can pull on it? So First one, guys, this is like the breakthrough. Make sure you if you get the book, make sure you get to this part of the book. Don't just read the first 20 pages and think, cool, I know more about charisma. This is so critical. Focus charisma is the first one. This is about presence and confidence. All right. And I think my wife and I were talking last night. She says, yeah, I can see how DISC relates to all of these. Visionary charisma is the second one. Belief and confidence. That's what it is. That's how it's going to reflect itself. There's somebody that comes in, they've got strong belief and confidence. Then there's the kindness charisma. And I think that's something that you've, and you can have multiple elements of these guys, any of us. It's not just one. But Rick, you have kindness charisma.
Aww,
my wife says that I have it too. So cool. Thank you. But kindness charisma is warmth and confidence. All right. That's how you see that reflected. And then the fourth one is authority charisma. And that's status and confidence. So, those are the 4: focus charisma, visionary charisma, kindness charisma, and authority charisma. And there is a great chart in the book that we can unpack. I do have that. So thoughts on that before we dive deeper? Because this is critical. I mean, we could spend a number of minutes on this, and this may be helpful for a lot of people.
Well, this chart is where, when I saw it again, that dovetailed me back to Cialdini. And you start understanding what the principles of persuasion are, where, it's either liking, you're likable. But when you start to go through, like, even authority, there's a certain level of persuasion that comes with authority. But the belief one is the one that spoke to me, only because of my career. I've seen just the impossible get done over and over and over again. So I just have this belief that we're going to accomplish it. Now, whether we're going to accomplish it within the time frame you want or for the cost you want, that's 2 totally different conversations. But I have this inherent belief in people that whatever it is that we set out to do, we're going to do. And we talked about this in our last podcast, that your vision can change, but you've got to have that path. There is no progress without a path, and there's no success without progress, right? So we've got to have that pathway. But I have just this innate belief that things are going to work out. That they as bad as things get, there's an upside. We're going to figure a way out. We're going to figure out a way through it because there's really no other choice. The other choice is to pack it in and go. And I think that inherent belief is how I can build the influence within my teams. That's how I get what I need done, is because I have that inherent confidence that this team's going to pull through it.
Yeah.
I talked about what I say, the breakthrough moment, all the time on the podcast is my favorite thing in a project. And that's where things are insurmountable. And then all of a sudden somebody has an idea and things start to work, and you finally can see how it's going to come together. And there's this incredible rush of momentum. And I call that the breakthrough moment. That's really the same thing as this belief charisma. So I can see how DISC dovetails into all of this. But I also see how the powers of persuasion of Dr. Cialdini are blended with this as well, which is really, really cool to see.
Yeah. Here's I love the examples that she pulls out for each of these charisma types. Like for visionary charisma that you're talking about, she mentioned Steve Jobs, Joan of Arc, and Martin Luther King Jr. So you're in good company there, buddy.
I don't. I'm going to go imposter syndrome on that, but I don't think I deserve that class at all.
No, and it's not. And don't compare yourself with those types.
Right.
Don't compare yourself with Steve Jobs and definitely not Joan of Arc or Martin Luther King Jr. It's just that you create belief. That's what they did. They created belief, right?
Yeah.
That's what they do. That's their foundation. Like focus charisma. And I've seen you, we could all at any point in time, we can leverage and use these elements of charisma, and how we need to support the scenario that's in front of us. So it's not like we're one and that's it. Again, we can leverage any of these. We just need to ask in that moment, is this going to require some visionary charisma? Is this going to require, in the position that I'm in, do I need to kind of use the position that I'm in to be an authority in this space? That's authority charisma. Is this going to require us to kind of focus? Is this going to require focus charisma? So the examples that he has for focus charisma is Gandhi and Chairman Mao and Bill Gates. And I'm sure there's a whole lot more that our listeners can think of. The kindness charisma, which you definitely reflect. I've seen you do this. I've seen you stand hours on end just greeting folks walking into to the lunchroom and just being kind. I've seen you at the end of the day just really connecting with people, and that's the caring element of it. Princess Di, Mother Teresa, Dalai Lama, those are the examples there. But don't compare yourself to each of those individuals. It's just the fact that those are what they're best represented in that charisma. And you are uniquely you, and be you. This is not just for Rick. This is for all of us. And finally, let me give you the examples for the authority charisma. She's got Colin Powell, Winston Churchill, and Margaret Thatcher. So it's a great list. I love it. I love each. I'm going to just kind of walk through these rows real quick, Rick, and let you comment on it. Like under authority charisma or any of them, she talks about how it makes people feel. Like authority, it makes them feel impressed, intimidated, so there's some elements of it, guys. Let's be real. If you come in with that charisma, recognize that it doesn't mean that everything is going to be perfect. There may be some folks who are apprehensive initially. They may be intimidated a little bit, but yet on the other hand, they may be impressed. Right? So on visionary, inspired, and they're going to feel inspired. Think of Martin Luther King Jr. on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, how inspired people were. How do people feel when there's focus charisma going on, right? They feel heard, they feel listened to, they feel understood. That's so critical. That gets into next week, we're going to do another book to lead that gets into this focus charisma element of it. Kindness charisma. How do people feel there? They feel accepted, embraced, cherished. So there's so much value out of these charismas. And we have that opportunity, each of us, to step in with confidence, to be, whether it's authority, a visionary, somebody with focus, or just that element of kindness to make that difference. So comments on that?
I like the focus one in the sense that obviously when I start to read these, I start to put people that I know and start thinking through them going, oh, that's kind of an explanation of how they do things. Or that's an explanation of how they can compel a room. And, I've got a dear friend, Colin Ellis, who does a really good job at commanding the stage. And I get jealous of his ability because I've realized in getting older, Paul, that the small talk with no meaning, I don't like so much. Like, I am an extrovert and I can meet other people and that kind of stuff. But when you're just like a networking meeting where it's like, oh, what do you do? And you can just tell that they're just waiting to throw their pitch at you, right? Like, or something like that. And so you're just like, there's small talk just for the sake of small talk. And I've gotten a lot of less and less patience for that. Like, I want that connection and stuff. But like, I've watched him sit down at every table and almost connect with each individual person that he's about to speak with before he gets up and does a full day seminar or a big keynote. And he asks questions and he's trying to figure out who they are so he can tailor the stories so that it means something to them. It's almost like he's almost personalizing the speech to each and individual person, which is weird to say. But that's that focus charisma. That's like an example of where I've really seen that put into plays. He sits down and he asks questions and he's really genuinely interested in who they are so he can pull the best of his material to satisfy who his audience is. And I have a lot of, I don't want to say envy, but like I envy the way he has that ability to sit down and draw that information out very quickly, but still be able to bounce around all the tables and give everybody almost equal time before he jumps up on stage, and certainly translates into, the rooms that he's able to book and the things that he's able to do. So it's that one that really spoke to me.
Yeah, that's good. That's a great example. Yeah. Boy, I wish we had a lot more time, Rick, to dive into this. Any other big components that you want to just hit before we get to tip and challenge?
I like she does a lot on self-compassion, right? And I think that's something that we all could do better in. I don't know anybody who's like, where you have to like, you got to chill out on your own compassion for yourself. You know what I mean? Like, I think the way that our brain is wired, and it'll go to my tip and challenge in a moment, but just understanding that whatever it is that you're feeling, like even, when we started our pre-record this morning, Paul, I was explaining to you, I was like, sometimes I feel flat right now. I'm not overly excited, but I'm not depressed. I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm just nice and even. And you said it perfectly back to me. Is like you're just existing. And I was like, yeah, right now, like I'm literally just existing at the moment. I'm not pushing myself forward, but I'm not pulling myself down. Right. I'm not happy, but I'm not sad. I'm just like super even keel right now. But recognizing that we all go through that, giving myself a break, not beating myself up for that to where I push myself to where I'm down. You know what I mean? I love when people start talking about tips and techniques and things to help with the self-compassion.
Yeah, I love the fact that you pulled on the self-compassion, because guys, we're in this crazy COVID world. We need some self-compassion for ourselves. We need compassion for others. And I love those tips that she shares. She unpacks a few here that are super simple. She says, step one is gratitude and appreciation. There's always something to be thankful for. There's always someone to be appreciative of in terms of their efforts. And we can walk into that space and that place. You see this, Rick. I mean, you do this, but John Maxwell, we certainly see that. He'll walk in with just some gratitude and appreciation. I mean, it's how he sets the table. And we can do that too. And that kind of sets for us internally. It gets us prepared for the moment. And I like what you said. I like too much chit chat or too much trivial stuff that sometimes happens. Let's get into why are we there again? Let's talk about what we're thankful for and appreciative of. It kind of gets us refocused and gets us away from some of the trivial stuff. And then step two is goodwill and compassion. And so now we can express that goodwill with one another, with compassion for another. But then to Rick's point just a moment ago, Step 3 is self-compassion. Practice self-compassion. So critical. That's almost a tip in the challenge in itself. But I love that. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about a moment ago, Rick, with the person or the charismatic styles, right? She says, know your personality. So when you're going to have self-compassion, think about, who are you? Know what feels right for you. And then choose the styles, the tools, whatever techniques you need to match your signature strengths. But recognize the value that you bring. Have self-compassion for yourself. Give yourself grace, forgive yourself if you need to on, not accomplishing what you meant to the day before, whatever it is. Have self-compassion, but know what your goals are. So if you know your goals, then you can be clear on what you want to achieve. And that kind of gives you that focus. And that allows you to be, if it's focus, charisma, that's important. Having those goals is helpful. So many good things in here, but we're just going to have to land the plane, Rick. Here we are again.
One more comment on that, and then I'll prompt you for your tip and challenge. But she says in here, the studies show that it's healthier. And this was something I needed to hear today. It's healthier to focus on self-compassion rather than self-esteem because it's not based on others, right? Self-esteem is really, self-esteem, you have to deal with the value of your value of yourself, but also a lot of your self-esteem comes from getting attribution from, your colleagues, your friends,
right,
your loved ones. But that it's actually healthier to focus on forgiving yourself than it is for getting those accolades or words of affirmation. I think that's a key point.
I love that. That's good. Very key point. Reminds me of just the affirmations you can give yourself, the I am statements, recognizing that, but having, this is critical. We could spend, Rick, maybe at a future podcast, and we'll bring in, we'll interview somebody that can help us with this whole area of self-compassion, because I think it's important. I think it's a missed leadership strength. It's a missed leadership exercise, right? So anyway, let's get into the tip and challenge. So again, we want to thank Olivia Fox Cabane, the author of the book, The Charisma Myth, for writing this phenomenal book. And I want to reach out to her, see if we can get her on an interview, Rick. I think that'd be fun. You would love to interview her, right?
I would.
Right, let's make it happen. All right. And we want to encourage you to grab a couple copies of this book. Don't just grab one, grab a few, and, get this for your team, get this for somebody, put this in your library for other folks to grab a hold of and use. Cause this may not be a book that they're going to wander into the bookstore and just buy and go up to the register to get, because they may feel a little bit awkward to get it just because of the title of it. But the truth of it is, if they have it, if they see access to it, they may grab it and look at it, and they're going to see the value and the benefits of this book. So again, encourage you to do it. Just go to Amazon, buy it if you want to. Go to Barnes and Noble. I'm sure they've got it, but also visit us at breakingaverage.com. So Rick, let's get into the tip and challenge. What you got?
The tip itself is around the self-compassion. So my tip is dovetailing what you just said, Paul, but it's to mastermind this book with somebody. Actually, it's more of a challenge, but the thought pattern is, the breakthrough in this is that we all experience some of these same things. When we talk about self-compassion, we talk about imposter syndrome. The community of understanding that everybody goes through that makes it okay for you to be dealing with that. And so I think if you buy the book and you read it, it's phenomenal. But I think if you had 5 or 6 close friends in which you could discuss this, that becomes a little bit more of a processing moment for you, where I think it really sticks. The tip is something that I learned from Mel Robbins, and I think I talked about it in the last podcast, but Mel's got this high 5 challenge. I've actually used this 3 times this weekend. And some people, you feel hokey doing this, you feel weird doing it. I'm telling you, just try it, especially in moments where things seem to be going off the rails. But you physically put your hand over your heart and you repeat to yourself and you say, I am safe, I am okay, and I'm loved. And that's it. and say it 2 or 3 times. But when anger starts to come away, or disappointment, or something just happened, there's literal science behind it and studies that show that by placing your hand over your heart and repeating those to you, that you'll start to get some of that calm. And that's one of those quick tips. That's one of those quick things. Some people talk about meditating, and in my world, I can't find 10 minutes sometimes just to be quiet anyway.
Yeah.
But that one right there was perfect. And the other thing she talks about, and it's why it's the high five challenge, is to look at yourself in the mirror and give yourself a high five, and just celebrate you and who you are. So that's my tip and challenge. Give yourself a high five, learn how to say, I am okay, I am safe, I am loved, and put your hand over your heart while you do that. And the challenge is to mastermind this book with friends.
I love that one. I'm practicing it right now.
Yeah.
All right. That's cool. I love it. I love it. And you can say it in your mind at any time, right? You can say it when you're driving, right? Pulling right up into that parking lot, right before the big meeting, right before you make that phone call that you've been dreading or worried about. You can just say it. I am safe. I am okay. I am loved. Powerful. Love that tip. I'm not sure I can match that, but I will share a couple other thoughts here. Just to support this whole idea, guys. You do have a unique gift for the world. You do have the ability to influence and impact the lives of other people. And start with yourself, all right? Influence you. Realize what you have. God created you for a reason. You're here for a purpose. And no matter what season you're in, you have a chance to add value to somebody else. So here's the thing. I want you to practice, and this is for me too. Practice the idea of presence, power, and warmth. Presence, power, and warmth. All right. That combination is one of the most effective frameworks to help maximize your full charisma potential. And we have that potential. You can grow in it. Enjoy the process. I love that point that she makes. Enjoy the process of just getting better, of being more present. All right. Wherever you're at, be all there. Jim Elliott said that. That's a powerful line for me. That's presence. Be there. Be connected. Realize that, in this world of social media and iPhones and notifications, you might show yourself as not fully present because you're being distracted. But allow yourself to put all those things aside and just connect with the eyes. Remember your body language, your gestures. We didn't really get into that, but it's so powerful. It's not just the voice of what you have, but it's just taking your ears, listening, and connecting, smiling, where appropriate, really listening in, lean in. All right. Be present, realize the power that you do have, but practice warmth to go with it. Power and warmth, they work together. So that's my tip and challenge, Rick. This has been phenomenal, but any final takeaways, final thoughts?
Well, yeah, when you say power and warmth works together, she says in the book that power without warmth is impressive, but can come across as cold, arrogant, and standoffish. Whereas warmth without power can be likable, but can come across as subservient and eager to please. So power and warmth together is really the mix that builds charisma.
Yes. So good. Great conversation today, Rick. Thank you for just bringing this book to the table for all of us. Great topic on breaking average. And once again, I'm inspired by our mission to really make an impact in the lives of others, and really to be able to step forward with greater confidence, because I think that's what we do when we practice these three things, when we work through that. And I love Rick's tip and challenge. I am safe. I'm okay. I am loved. Join us again next time as we continue our series on books to lead on the Breaking Average podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. This show was produced by R2 Multimedia. A special thank you to Milestone Melodies for our theme music. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.